The Village Market, located at 95 Main Street, Fairfield, is your small-town, fully stocked grocery store with that big store feel. Carrying quality vegetables, fruits, meats, deli items, and surefine products. They even have some inviting desserts. On your lunch break, stop by and grab one of the prepared, ready-to-go meals. Village Market's knowledgeable and courteous staff makes your visit an enjoyable experience. Visit them on Facebook and online at villagemarketfairfield.com. Open 7 days a week, the Village Market. We've got your groceries and more.
Welcome to What's Happening in Augusta. This will be probably our next to last show because we will have a few more things to do and then run a final show. All right, I'm John Picciotti. I'm representative for District 108, which consists of Fairfield, Smithfield, and Mercer. And with me is my guest, Senator Scott Searway, who is Senator of
District 16, and that's covering Fairfield, Benton, Clinton, Waterville, Winslow, and Albion, Unity Plantation. So, yeah, I'm the senator, and we're going to discuss what we have been dealing with in legislature lately and what we accomplished and maybe some of the things that we're looking at. So it'll be an interesting morning.
Yes, and we will be giving probably a few more facts than what either the press or that's coming out of Augusta. So we've got the hands-on situation. And I think the first thing that we probably should talk about is the budget. I know that everybody's been looking at it. There has been multiple different aspects of the budget that have been talked about, that have been shown. And, the first thing I'd like to say is that I voted for the budget, and so did Senator Searway. And the main thing is that we just simply did not want to shut the state down. We have a particular, this time of year, this is our big money time of the year with our tourist attraction and et cetera. And also, we just did not want to see the state shut down particularly this time of year. The budget probably isn't 100% of what we would have liked. It's a lot, but there was some very, very good things in it, and I think it was the best that we could do, given the circumstances. We have a House that was controlled by the Democrats. We have a Senate that was controlled by the Republicans, and there is, it's a compromise situation. Do you think?
Yeah, I think that everybody was pretty much working towards what they believed in, and I think that, I didn't have any problems with anyone there. They all had their own, way of thinking, but overall, everybody was trying to do the best job that they could, and I think that, the good thing about our democracy is that we all work together to come up with a solution. You have to have a 2/3 margin in order to pass a budget, and so we worked together, and it worked out. And I think, and something I wanted to mention is that, the governor did a lot of good things that people don't realize. I mean, they don't hear about the good things he does, because, but he really did. I mean, when he vetoed a lot of these bills, we could bring them back, and it needed a 2/3 vote, and we got rid of some of the things that really shouldn't have been in there. So I think, those things you don't hear about, but I wanted to mention that because I think the governor did good in some of those aspects, and I really appreciate what he did on that. I know, it did make things a little lengthy and longer for us to work things out, but I think in one respect, I saw there's some good things that came out of it too. So on the aspect as far as passing the budget, yeah, I voted to pass it, and And the things that people don't realize that could have happened if we had a shutdown, I listed a few just so that you'd understand why it's important that we passed it. If we had a shutdown, these are some of the things that could have happened. Could have had relatives that were visiting for the summer or looking for a day trip to enjoy the outdoors. Don't count on any state parks. They would have been all closed down. Knowing someone who is a state trooper or works for the Department of Corrections, they'll likely be working without a paycheck. In a local business, waiting for a permit to expand for a license to sell certain products or to refill on their lottery stock, they won't be able to get any of these things done. And then if a local contractor waiting for a permit from the state to begin construction, they won't be able to get that. If you're trying to get a license to sell agricultural products, they can't be done during the shutdown. If there's construction projects to improve state roads near you, that would have to be delayed until the shutdown ends. If you know anyone relying on unemployment payments, they won't be able to get them. If you know anyone in a nursing home, those nursing homes won't be receiving payments from the state. And if you need to renew your driver's license, you can't do that if there's a shutdown. And wanting a hunting and fishing license, you can't get those if there's a shutdown. So those are just some of the things that we're touching on, but also that we have a lot of people in this area that work for the state. And if you are working for the state, you would not be receiving your payments unless you're a real crisis person, but even then, you wouldn't get your paycheck. So
Yeah.
really important.
It was absolutely. The other thing was, too, unfortunately, now I know the governor had given us a supplemental budget that would have extended it for, at least extended our debates for 30 days and kept the state running. The problem is you needed 2/3 vote, and there was not a prayer that we could have gotten a 2/3 vote in the House to run that one, which still would have caused a shutdown. So it just was an impossible situation.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. However, on a retrospect of it, we came up with a $200 million tax cut for Mainers by 2018, and projects to be more than $1 billion over the next decade in implementing the following changes. Now, first of all, the tax brackets. In 2016, the tax brackets will drop considerably. And we also did increase standard deductions, which is another thing that isn't understood. So from $0 to $21,050, the tax break would be 5.8%. Standard deductions up to $11,600. 21,000 to 37,500 is 6.75, and 37,501 and up is 7.15%.
And it was 7.95.
Exactly.
So it's dropped almost a whole point, which is quite a bit of money when you're thinking even in the higher tax brackets. So,
Right.
And not to mention that we got into keeping the sales tax the same, so you won't see any change there. And the only thing that we actually increased was the tax on motels and hotels and
Right.
and, that went up just 1%.
1%, yeah.
So it's not going to be, and so the out-of-staters will be paying quite a bit of the sales tax, which will help the Mainers. So that's a good thing. And I mean, when you go to another state, you're paying a pretty high sales tax on motels and hotels, and you think nothing of it when you go to get that room. So I'm thinking that this is, to me, a common sense approach where we're going to get money back in our pockets.
Yep. The other thing we did in 2017, the tax for the middle class, so to speak, was jumped from $37,500 to $50,000, so that that grouping from $37,500 to $50,000, their taxes dropped from 7.15% to 6.75%.
Yep.
The other thing we did, military pensions, 100% exempt from income tax.
And Maine's used high in the military for going overseas for
Yes.
wartime or for
We have a very, very big amount of veterans that live here.
And I have a lot of respect for the people that take their time and put their service in and help out.
The other thing that people don't know, or I shouldn't say people don't know, but that was kind of hidden there, is $2 million in funding for Maine's nursing homes. And what that did was trigger a federal match of $16 million biennium. So it did, even though it doesn't look like it, we did help the nursing homes out with this budget. And then another $1.5 million for people with Mainers with traumatic brain injuries. And another $5 million for funding disabled Mainers on wait lists.
And we did fund additional drug enforcement agents and drug court. So we did fund extra on that as well. I know it didn't get quite to the amount of 8 drug agents, but I think they got up to 4.
I believe so, yep.
So, but that's good. And being a DARE officer, I always look at prevention, but also you do have to have enforcement. And the drug culture is on the increase. And I've been fighting the marijuana laws because I'm getting more and more information back on what is happening in Colorado. And right now, the newspapers are even saying in Colorado that they probably shouldn't have promoted it as much as they did because they're finding more crime and more addictions and that marijuana isn't helping on the medical field as they predicted. And so now we're seeing that in a 2-year time period, we're already noticing big differences. And so we should be standing back and watching what's going on there. And instead of putting in what NORML, an organization that's trying to legalize marijuana, is really pushing hard to get Maine on board and of what they're doing in Colorado. And they're also trying to weaken our laws. I fought hard on trying. They had a law here about trying to make heroin addicts or to have a first-time break instead of a felony charge, to bring it down to a misdemeanor, and for the first-time offense. I feel, if you look at the bath salt situation, and we had it right here in Fairfield.
Yes, big time.
A big operation. When they changed the laws and they made them much harsher, guess what? Do you hear about it now? That's the point I'm making. If we go and lessen our laws, then we're going to have a bad epidemic. And not to mention, they're trying to lower our standards of law enforcement getting information on the Fourth Amendment right. And here we are, they were trying to take away the officers being able to get the information on federal information on people that have federal crimes. And so that's very traumatic. I even gave the Senate floor an instance that happened me personally. My daughter, a guy, looking in the windows, and I got his plate number, and I researched it and found out he had a history of immoral exposure of body parts in the military. And if I wasn't a law enforcement officer and didn't have this right to get that information, I would have had a problem. We wouldn't have had all the evidence to get him convicted. So this is what I'm talking about. We can't take away these laws that we have in place and weaken them. We're going to end up with a major problem. And one Democrat stood up and said that law enforcement officers are lazy and that's why he wanted to get rid of this law to allow law enforcement officers to get it. And when he said that, that's insulting to law enforcement. Law enforcement works hard at trying to protect the people and serve the public. So don't think we're trying to do a good job. We are. And so I think that this is very important to really take a look at what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I'm going to go back to when I was much, much younger, back in the days when it was probably a little less cocaine and a little less heroin and more cocaine type of thing. And I can remember the big thing with marijuana was, well, if they smoke marijuana, it's just simply a prelude to bring them into the level of cocaine. Now, it was poo-pooed a lot, and it still is today, that says, oh no, that stuff doesn't work that way. But I used to see it considerably, especially when I was living in the Midwest, is that, somebody would start out on the marijuana and then just gradually move up to the higher drug levels of the cocaine. And heroin wasn't quite as big back then, but the cocaine was the big thing. And it is. And I'm afraid if it's legalized, just like within Colorado, they're going to see a big push into the more illegal, coming across from the Mexican drug lords and stuff like that. They're going to push more of that stuff in there. And it's going to be a big, big problem.
And I'm not saying there aren't parts of marijuana that may help people. They have a pill called Marinol that is a THC pill that's FDA approved, and it can be used for certain ailments. But what we're talking about is abuse of marijuana. And if it becomes a social entity, then that's going to be abuse, because we're going to have a real problem with it. Drops a person on a regular basis of using marijuana can drop his IQ down 8 points. So, and actually in Colorado, there was a situation where a guy he was getting medical marijuana, and a caregiver was giving it to him, and he went to his workplace, and the workplace said, we're going to do drug testing today. And he said, well, I have a prescription for medical marijuana, and I have a caregiver give it to me. And he says, so I should be able to be exempt from this. Well, they said, no, there's no exemptions. You can't be using marijuana, period. And they fired him. And so he took it to court, and he lost. And then he went to Supreme Court and lost 6-0. 6 judges to 0. The 6 judges says you cannot have medical or any type of marijuana in your system, period, on a work site. And so the Supreme Court came up with that. That's federal and state, because federally it is still an illegal substance, and it is not a proven medical cure for anything. There are pieces, like I said, of marijuana that may help, but when you got 400 other chemicals that's added to marijuana, such as arsenic, carbon dioxide, different ammonia, which you use to clean your toilet bowl out with, all these things are in that substance. Not to mention it affects your brain to the point where if you think of your brain as a computer and you have megabytes and gigabytes. Well, megabytes, if you remember the computers on the Commodore 64.
The old days.
You used to type up on the screen and it would be there, but you couldn't save it. Well, that's what happens with marijuana. It won't allow you to save the information. And so that's why you see kids that are using marijuana flunk out in high school, because they can't remember what they study. And so, because it cuts that off. So the gigabytes was where you could put it in the hard drive and save information. And that's what your brain does. It saves the things you want to save. For example, you probably can't remember what you ate a week ago, but a week ago, if you did something really special and you saved that information about maybe a fishing trip you went on, caught the biggest fish, you remembered that. So you chose to save that information. Well, marijuana won't allow you to save that information. And some people go all year long and can't remember what they did for good experiences.
And that was proven true, I think, too, like back in the older days in colleges and stuff, with kids going to school and stuff like that, really messed them up from a
and the THC
standpoint.
Levels have skyrocketed since those old days. It was 3% back in the 60s. Now you're talking about 30%. And then with these bongs and with the dabs that they put in it, it's risen up to 80% and even higher. So when you're talking about marijuana use, we're talking about serious drugs now. It's high technology.
Yep.
So we're talking about serious stuff here.
So another thing, too, I thought that was very good, because we did, of course, it was vetoed in the barrage there, but was the cold case bill that was sponsored by Representative Carl Ward.
Right.
And I think that is a big plus, too, particularly in the Waterville area where we have had a major...
I usually can have my ribbon on, too, for that cold case.
Yes.
I didn't have it on today.
Yeah,
but,
you're right. I've got one at home, too.
Yeah. I always think of the McLean case that's up in Millinocket. It's still, to this day, nobody's... they've got suspects, but they haven't proven anything. And these cold cases are very important.
Yeah,
and I think that if you had somebody just totally directed on that, I think it would be very important.
Of course, we've got the Ayla Reynolds case in Waterville,
Ayla Reynolds.
which is an important bill around there.
We almost thought we had a break there with that child they found out in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So we still don't know on that. But all these cold cases, and not to say that state police, their detective agency does a great job, and also some of the sheriff's offices and even the city police, they do a great job. I don't want to take away from what they do, but I think that the cold case project would be a good one to have.
Yep. And we the governor actually signed a bill into law just recently called constitutional carry. And, the big thing with that is, and of course you hear from people, well, now everybody can put blah, blah, blah. What people don't understand is that in Maine, you could always carry a gun. If you were legally, you're not a felon, you're not, passive. If you're legal to do it, you could always carry a gun. The problem is that you couldn't put your coat over it. You'd had to carry it open. It had to be seen. So if you had one in the car, for example, and drove up to sitting on the front seat, and you drove up to stop and get a newspaper, and you throw your coat over the gun because you don't want somebody to smash your window and get it, and you run into the store and get it, you could be arrested at that time for having a concealed weapon because you threw your coat over it. What this law specifically does is just say concealed weapon is the same as an open weapon. And it doesn't, it isn't that big of a change. Everybody thinks it is, but it really isn't that big of a change.
Well, me being in law enforcement, it was a very difficult choice for me to make.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I'll tell you that I had a very hard time with this one. The Sheriff's Association was against it, and the Chiefs Association was against it. But then we also had the state police that went for it.
For it, right.
And so that really put a tough battle for me to come up with an answer here, because certainly I believe training is the biggest issue here. If you are not trained with a firearm, it's a very dangerous instrument to have on you. So I would suggest that anybody that has a firearm to be well trained in some fashion. And whether it's from somebody that is in your family that's very experienced or to go through a training course, there are some really good people out there that can train very well.
Yep.
But training was my big thing, and also being responsible as a citizens to be able to have a firearm, and also screening, because there are people that are just not suited to carry a firearm. And you probably know some people that are very smart but not common sense oriented.
Right.
Or they may have mental illness, or they may be a person that has other issues that would not make the person, whether it's criminal activity or maybe has a drinking problem. You don't want alcohol to be mixed with having a firearm. Certainly there are laws out there to protect you, but it's after the effect, not before in many cases.
But then again, the other aspect is, though, in some of those, whether it be the mental or whatever, that doesn't really prevent anybody from having a gun. And even if you don't have a concealed permit, if you've got the criminal background, whether it's mental or alcohol or anything, you still go out and people still carried guns and everything else. So it was just, the law just basically made it legal for an average citizen that wanted to get a gun. Training aspect, yes, is very important.
I had a concern about the cost of having this law passed, because I think it cost us, what, $270,000?
Well, it was $250,000, I believe. The point is I'm not sure. I'd have to see the exact figures of how much they take in.
That's the
getting
concern.
Getting your permit, I mean, come on, you go over and...
I don't know who came up with the figure, but anyway, that was a concern to pass the law, because of costs they were claiming would take away from the permit process.
Yeah. And you still have to have, the other thing to remember is that for reciprocity, to go over to another state or something, you still have to have your concealed permit. So you're still going to have to go, if anybody's traveling, you're still going to have to go down to the state police or police station and get your permit.
So what I did is I held off for a long period of time, saying that I wasn't going to vote for it. And then at the very end, I said I'll vote for it if I can get some amendments. And so I kind of went to the House members, and I went to some legislators, senators, and whatever, and pushed for amendments. And we did get some, so that was good. One I really pushed for was the age limit, because I didn't want young kids to be carrying firearms under their jackets or whatever, and going to schools or whatever. And so I said no one under 21 unless they were military. Then if they're trained at 18, that they can have a firearm. Another one was if you have a firearm and it's concealed and you get pulled over by a law enforcement officer, they have to let them know.
Have to let them know, right.
That's a safety thing for law enforcement. And then also there was another one for when, and Senator Volk put one in for when you purchase a gun, to know when and where you can have a gun and where you can't. Because sometimes people don't get it. They'll say, I have a legal right to carry it, even when they go into a courtroom or go to some federal building or whatever. So it's really important for them to know where their boundaries are. And also to have training, instructions about cleaning a gun and how to handle a gun that they sign for when they purchase a brand new gun. So they do have that in place. So there are some good amendments that we put in. So I can't say it's 100%, but at least it's better than what we would have got. So.
Right. And then another one that I thought was a very strong one was which affects a lot of people in this area, is the Lyme disease bill, which was LD 422. And as everybody, particularly that has Lyme disease, I mean, we've had a few suicides in our area, which people are very much aware of because that disease is so debilitating and just cripples people and affects them so much mentally. And there is a therapy that is that treats this chronic Lyme disease, and it's dispensing long-term antibiotics. Now, it was frowned upon by the for whatever reason by the state
Board.
Yeah. And a lot of physicians would not. Treatment wasn't illegal, but a lot of physicians wouldn't use it because of fear of retribution. And I know of a few people that actually have to drive down to Massachusetts to get this treatment. It's just crazy. So we've passed the Lyme disease bill. It'll go into law that says that, period, a physician is allowed to administer or dispense long-term antibiotic therapy to a patient with acute, persistent, or chronic Lyme disease. And I think that is a big, big plus in our area because we have so many people with that.
Yeah, the tick population has really exploded in the last few years. I remember as a kid, you never even heard about it.
A tick, yeah.
I worked on a farm. I was out in the woods hunting. I went fishing. I never even experienced a tick on me. Well, last year I had a tick on me, and I had the ring, the whole works. And I had to get the antibiotics, and I just got tested a little while ago, and I don't have Lyme's disease.
Wow,
But so it can happen to anybody, And I just went out target practicing, and I got that tick on me.
Well, out in the
grass.
I remember when I was a kid, the biggest thing we had to fear is when I used to go to my grandmother and grandfather's on Highland Lake. And the biggest fear we had was if you got over into the weeds a little bit on the lake, you'd get a leech on your leg.
Yeah.
That was the biggest fear we had of anything like that back then.
Right. So, but you're hearing more and more of Lyme's disease. I got a friend that was a state trooper. She got Lyme's disease, and she lost her job a year before she found out that she actually, it was a little over a year, she found out she had Lyme's disease, and she found out 2 days after she got terminated from state police in New Hampshire. So she had to fight to get back her job.
Yeah.
And she found a doctor that treated her, and she now has very little to no symptoms. So she got it corrected, and she went back to work, and now she just retired.
Yep.
So but it's important. We're trying to find out ways to get Lyme's disease found out whether you have it or not faster too, because that's really important. The Extension Service is working on one right now, but they're talking about a tax on pesticides and certain chemicals, and it's another added tax. I understand it's not only for the Lyme's disease. They'll be able to pick up Lyme's disease within 2 days of testing, which right now it takes almost 10 days if you take a Lyme's disease, and so that would be significant.
Big plus.
And the other part of this is that you would be getting warning labels about putting pesticides on your property or in your, handling it and whatever. It would give you more information, which I think is very important too.
Yep.
But there again, it's another 20 cents on each item, and there's quite a big debate on that. And a lot of stores don't want it. But I understand it from the other aspect as well. So it's a tough decision to make. I'm kind of for it because I've had friends that have had Lyme's disease, and it's a very serious illness. And if we can do anything to help them, I think we've got to take the time because it's getting bad out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's been a lot of, different things. I know there's an industrial hemp bill
Yes.
that have gone through. Of course, we talk about the hemp aspect, but you know what? Makes pretty good rope.
It makes good rope, but at the same token, I'm worried it gives the wrong image.
It does.
For what we're trying to accomplish, so I was not for it.
Yeah.
It also does have 3% THC,
Yeah.
as what the 60s had.
Yeah, we used to.
So there is a concern there.
It was out, and again, I'm going to go back to when I was growing up, because industrial hemp was very much during World War II. That's what they used for rope. They didn't have the stuff that they have today, and they used hemp for rope for the ships and things.
Yeah.
And of course, out in the Midwest, there was tons of hemp grown because the corn, in the cornfields.
Sure.
And then when, of course, the war ended and all that, and they started growing corn again, it was unbelievable. Back in the 60s, there was still a tremendous amount of hemp that used to grow around the perimeters of the cornfield and stuff that you could get into. So you're absolutely right. It was a major problem.
Yeah. So it is a concern.
Yeah, you could have it grown in your backyard and you didn't even know what it was. That's
Yeah. I fought that. I was against it. So, but it did pass.
It did pass. And then an act to, there was also LD 722, which I think was good, which is an act to strengthen penalties for abuse of general assistance. And again, if somebody fraudulently obtains GA benefits, they must make restitution, and then they lose their benefits for 120 days.
Yeah.
So, because that is a very strong cost to the taxpayer, to the property owners of the particular towns and stuff.
Yep.
So let's go with the other thing, which is very controversial. It's been all over the press and TV, is the term adjournment. And I know that they do use it instead of recess, where they will say, okay, the House is now adjourned until tomorrow at 10 o'clock or till next Wednesday at 10 o'clock or whatever it may be. And they do use the word adjournment, unfortunately, instead of we're in recess, so to speak. So that's a tough one. But the adjournment it's like you're adjourning a meeting. All right, we'll meet again tomorrow. However, by Constitution, it does say that if the House and Senate are adjourned, they have to be called back, and pocket vetoes and all that other stuff. So what's your...
Well, the governor, may be right and he may be wrong. So it's one of those situations where I guess that's up to interpretation by the courts, and they'll have to decide on that, whether those laws will become in effect or not, and how they're going to be dealt with is a real... I'll tell you, one thing that Paul LePage is good at is trying to get things changed, and he comes up with some darndest thing.
Exactly.
I think that he's a very colorful, dynamic person, and whether you like him or you don't, he has done some things that I don't think it's been done before. So.
This is true. Well, and the adjournment, and if you think of the adjournment aspect, after every session that we have, at least in the House, I'm not sure in the Senate if they do the same thing, but we'll say, the House is now adjourned until tomorrow morning. So if that's the case, we've been adjourned since last January.
So wording can be tricky, just like that "and."
Yes, that stupid little...
So just one word. So whether adjournment, or if they say they're adjourned, it may be taken literally instead of by what their practice is. So it's hard to say. So I think that certainly there were some bills in there that I would have certainly have liked to see go through the 2/3 vote.
Yes.
And they may have gotten killed, or they may have been good bills.
Yeah, there was a couple of bills there that were very, very good. I've got a small list, but there was some very good bills that were passed by both the House and the Senate. I know there was
the teacher bill for the 2.55 for retirement.
Yes,
I believe that one was in there, and to me, that one I think would have passed anyway. So either way, I think it's going to be okay. But I don't know if it's going to be held up at all. I don't know.
Yeah, there was the, there was some of these bills that had passed through so strong that they would have been, that the vetoes would have definitely been overridden because they were good bills, not because of what they did, but they were actually pretty good bills.
Right. So, but overall, I think we have a good budget. We have, it certainly isn't what our governor wanted, but I think he certainly did affect it, and he did help. So, I am not saying that Paul LePage didn't do a good thing. I think he did make a difference.
Yeah, and I look at the other aspect. Given all the circumstances, I think our leaders did a very good job in negotiating a decent budget. Like I said, it was when I started out. It's not something that was 100% great budget, but I think it is all for the favor of Maine voters. And
so. But also that I think that, we worked together with the Democrats as well.
Yep.
And they worked hard too, and I mean, we all did. And I got along with them all, and I think that we came up with a somewhat good solution for the state. So I feel good about how it came out, even though, you're not going to make everybody happy. And you're not going to make everybody pleased with the results.
Right.
But you try to do your best for the communities, and that's what I was thinking of.
It's called
my constituents.
It's called working together, and we got to do it.
Yes.
In order to get anything accomplished,
Right.
And we don't want to be like a few of the other states around that are sitting there banging heads against each other and being.
Yeah. And what's nice is John and I have a good relationship, and I'd meet him in the middle of the hall, and we'd talk about what's happening in the House or the Senate.
Yep.
And he could explain to me what's going on over there and whatever, and we could work together and try to get things talked about in our caucuses and whatever, and it does make a difference.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we'll probably, we will have one more show because we go back on the 16th, as it sits right now.
Yeah.
We go back on the 16th. From my knowledge, I think when we left, I had gotten word that there was like 70 vetoes that we had to contend with and go back and look at and either sustain or override, depending upon whether it was a good bill. Because I think the governor had taken the aspect that he didn't care what the bill was; he was just going to veto it. So,
well, I'm hoping that this other part gets resolved, so we know where we stand on it
Right.
comes to the 16th.
yes.
So that's the main idea. Well, thank you for your time to watch this program, because I think it's important to know what's happening in Augusta, and we really appreciate your constituency and helping us. And I've talked to a lot of people, and they try to tell me what they like and what they don't like, and I try to make the best decision from that I can when I go to the Capitol.
And it's the more we hear from you, the much better we are, because we know what you want, because we represent you.
That's right.
And that's what we've got to hear. So, please feel free to contact myself or Senator Searway, either through email, phone, whatever. Just feel free to contact us.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.